where I'm sitting at right now, I'm in a condo. You can see behind me on the ocean. Oceanfront condo, amazing. I bought this place for less than $700,000 before the pandemic, and it's literally tripled in value.
What did you learn from turning this condo around? Kind of share as a message for somebody else who is trying to get involved with real estate in the same way.
Never do it. People don't realize that.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Capitalist podcast. I am excited to be here. My name is Austin Brunner. This is my co-host, Cody Shirk. Cody, what's going on, man? How are you doing today?
Just living the dream here in South Florida, which is what we're going to talk about today. I kind of say that as a joke because I just think of Magda from, what's that movie? Ben Stiller and the old lady who just gets sunburned like a old leather purse in South Florida. I feel like everybody just thinks of old people down here, but I'm living the dream down here with all of them.
Well, you got your pro fishing gear shirt on.
Yeah.
Which is important because that when you're on the beach, you want to be able to get out there, get out on the ocean, keep from getting sunburned, catch fish. I always think of I love the guys with the big long sleeve PFG shirts.
Oh, that's what I usually run.
I'm vented.
Yeah, I definitely fish, but I'm more of a surfer, as you know. I think surfing and then fishing's next down. But I definitely run that program. I have
the back.
Oh
vents.
yeah, total dork. Like when I turned 35, I was like, you know what? That equipment actually kind of works pretty well, so I'll give in. It's, when you look at that, you're like, oh, that's ugly dad clothing, but it works. So I got like the wide brim hat and all that. I try to keep it a little bit cooler, a little more stylish. But yeah, the PFG. I don't usually run this, but hey, I got to do look professional.
You got to honor Florida as this episode. We are diving into Florida real estate.
There's something about Mary. That's the movie.
Okay, yeah. There is
with Magda.
Magda. Yeah, today's episode, we are going to be diving into Florida real estate. We're going to talk about what has happened, talk about Cody's journey into Florida real estate, what he's done, what he's learned, and we're also going to talk about some of the unique things Florida is exposed to in the real estate market and some predictions from Cody about where he thinks it's going and where some of the opportunities are. I'm personally really excited about this episode because it's an opportunity for me to learn some more about what you've been doing in the real estate market and learn a little bit more about Florida real estate. We did one about Austin, and this is something that I am not an expert in. Florida is exciting because just like Texas, it's been one of the most exciting real estate markets on planet Earth, to be perfectly honest. I mean, in America, on planet Earth, Florida and Texas have been incredible real estate markets. So let's just kick it off, man. And when did you first move to Florida?
Yep.
And how did you get involved with the real estate market?
Yeah. And just really quickly, it just happened to be that I lived here and you happen to live in Austin, so we can speak with authority on these topics. I am not a Floridian. I'm definitely a newcomer. Floridians, it's very rare to be a Floridian. Very few people have grown up here and stayed here. It's a lot of transplants here. But I moved here in 2018, so I moved before the pandemic wave. But I'm certainly not a super long-term resident.
Where'd you move from?
I moved from the Los Angeles County area of LA. I moved from Malibu. I hate to say that because everyone has a vision of what Malibu is, but I moved from there. And as I said before, I'm a water person. I love surfing. I love fishing. I love boats. I love all that. The surf is definitely better in California, but I've been surprised. It's actually not bad where I'm at here in Florida, but the water lifestyle is insane here. I say this to myself. People don't realize that Florida is a tropical beach in the United States. You have a first world country with the weather and backdrop that most people travel to, South Pacific for. It's in the US. It's right here. Nobody knows about that.
So you moved, yeah. I mean, truly, it's an incredible place. And so you moved there in 2018. Came from Malibu. What drove you there?
Yeah, so there was a lot of things. I had some personal stuff going on, just like everyone has different life stories. So there's part of that with my kids. I had a little girl at the time. Now I have two kids. And one of the things that we were looking at is, hey, is life better in California for kids right now, or is it better in Florida? But also state taxes in California, top income earners are paying 14% on top of federal in California. In Florida, it's 0%. Housing was also much cheaper at the time here, and the general quality of life, I would argue, is a light year ahead of Florida for a family. Much lower traffic.
You
I mean,
talking about ahead of like Southern California
yeah,
for a
and
family?
I
Yeah.
love California, but especially as an individual, say you're young, single, California's a dream. Throw some babies in there, throw some businesses that you're running in there, throw your commute time and traffic, and you start to like scratch your head. You're like, what am I doing here? This is crazy. I'm living in this place that is really difficult and paying a premium for it. Where I've got this other bunch of other locations throughout the U.S. And for me, Florida was very attractive back then. So moved here in 2018.
Did you buy a house right away,
Yeah,
or
yeah. I bought a house. It was a
and what part of
townhouse.
Florida did you move to?
So I'm in Palm Beach County. Most people know of Palm Beach, which is the island. That's probably one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest area in the United States. To the west of Palm Beach is West Palm Beach, appropriately named. And that is the major city of Palm Beach County. About 45 minutes south is Fort Lauderdale, and then about an hour south from West Palm Beach is Miami. So it's the whole South Florida area. I call this the northern part of South Florida, which is again the Palm Beach County area. And the reason we moved here, we had some friends here, we had some family, and we just had some loose connections. We purchased a home. We purchased a townhome. At the time, it was $500,000, 4-bedroom, 4-bath, like super nice place. And compared to the California, it was like, why is this place so cheap? So we bought then and lived there for like 2 years, and then the pandemic hit and everything changed in all the ways. My personal life, the real estate market, companies moving into Florida, everything changed in Florida.
You could
And
never have predicted in 2018 that was going to happen.
we were talking earlier on a different call, you and me, about how crazy the pandemic was, and even the things I recall now, it's almost hard to believe. For in California, they closed the beaches down in California. You weren't allowed to go swimming in the ocean. You could be the only person on a beach swimming in the ocean, and the police would come down and arrest you. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, people went nuts. What people don't realize in Florida and in Texas and other places, other than maybe a month, life went on. Businesses were open, restaurants were open, business continued, schools were open, kids were playing with each other, people were having birthday parties. It wasn't this like crazy lifestyle of living in a bubble. And at the end of the day, I think people who crave freedom and wanted to live their life the way they wanted flocked here. They flocked to Florida because life went on. The economy here boomed. It boomed during that entire time. So I always say, like, what pandemic? I didn't really live through the pandemic. I know everyone else complains about it, but I just watched it on the news mostly.
I felt similar in Austin. So you get into this townhouse. How long did you live in that townhouse? Did you move during the pandemic? Are you in the same spot? What's been kind of your real estate journey there?
So I've done 5 or 6 real estate transactions in the past several years since 2018 in Florida. So I would say I've everything from condo to townhome to regular house to land and then building. So I've kind of done the whole spectrum of real estate projects here. I'm not a developer or anything. I would just say I'm a personal or private investor doing all these projects. My experience, again, across projects has been diverse, but also the time period is drastically different. The interest rates are different, but also with the prices. So we were in a townhome, and then we purchased a home in 2020, which is like down the street, again, in the northern part of Palm Beach County, which is the Jupiter area. And then I also purchased a condo, which I remodeled, and did some land, and I did another house. In 2018, when we moved to Florida, businesses did much better. One, taxes went down for us personally, but also just, it's a hard work and opportunity. Luck happened for us, and we were making more money. So we were able to afford housing, but it was still relatively cheap before the pandemic here. There was some crazy deals, and that's one of the big trends and topics that I want to go over in Florida, which is Florida is a retirement state. And the vast majority of real estate here is either really old or needs some sort of major retrofit renovation. And the reason why is because retirees have been living here forever, and there hasn't been a really big market of people coming in and turning real estate around. So right before the pandemic hit, I noticed this. I said, like, this is crazy. It's a really high quality of life down here. Real estate's really cheap, and no one really wants to do these renovation projects because they're older. They don't want to take a big project on. So for me, younger, hungrier, got a little bit of money behind me, I'm gonna go to town. And that was kind of what started my journey on the whole real estate thing here.
That's interesting because that's very different than Austin,
right?
Where I've lived. It's not a real estate community at all. And a lot of hungry people have been turning over real estate it's a very competitive market in that sense. So that's very interesting. First kind of observation of the difference between what's been happening where you're at in Florida and where I've been at in Austin. Again, both incredibly hot markets, just different.
Yeah, and I would even say that Florida, again, never could have predicted the pandemic. That changed everything, which I'll talk about in a second. But where I'm sitting at right now, I'm in a condo. You can see behind me on the oceanfront condo, amazing. I bought this place for less than $700,000 before the pandemic, and it's literally tripled in value. But the reason why I bought it so cheap is because it was original 1981. It needed a complete redo, and I lowballed the heck out of what the person was asking. And the reality is, at the time, nobody wanted to go through the trouble of doing a remodel, and remodels are a pain in the butt. But if you're a retiree coming from New York, Michigan, any of the cold states coming down to Florida, you want a turnkey project. You're not
You
like,
don't want to remodel.
no,
Exactly.
And you're retiring. You're like, I'll pay a premium for something's done. So there's a ton of real estate. There was, and there still is a lot of real estate here that needs work, and you can buy for significantly under market value. But again, you need to do the work. And that's what I did here in this condo. So today I'm actually selling my condo now because I'm up a lot, but also my life has changed. I got a bigger growing family. I need to get out of the condo into a larger home, and we'll do well on this place. But again, I would say the biggest value for me is remodeling.
If you were to sell at the peak, so when was the peak in Florida?
I would say the peak was pretty recently. I know we talked about Austin peaked in like 2022-ish. I would say the peak in Florida happened late 2023, maybe early 2024. And the other interesting thing about Florida, I just explained the whole thing about the retirement demographic. It's also extremely seasonal here. So you have snowbirds, which are people that come down from the cold parts of the U.S. down to the warm parts of Florida. And they only come down typically general range of about Thanksgiving to Easter. And other than that, Florida's like empty, or it used to be really empty. So Easter to Thanksgiving, the population probably, I don't know what it does, but it significantly decreases. So when the snowbirds are here, the real estate market's hot, and when they're gone, the real estate market's cold. So right now we're in the summer of 2024. Real estate market is frozen right now, but it's also frozen because the market's turning, and nothing's really happening right now.
Interesting. So that was kind of the peak. So it peaked a little bit later than like Austin. What would you say the market correction in your experience in your area and then overall Florida has looked like?
So another interesting thing about Florida, just like the US, is that Florida's a big state, just like Texas, just like California, and it's impossible to say Florida is doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you have Tampa, you have Jacksonville, you have where I'm at, the Palm Beach area, you have Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Naples, etc. So I would say where I'm at right now, homes are just starting to like show softness, but condos are probably down 20%. And the reason why it's not down more is because there's stubborn sellers that just haven't caught on to the reality of, oh God, like it's worth a lot more. So I'm
selling a lot less, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm selling my place right now for about 25% less than a comp sold for.
Then it was quote valued at the top.
Actually, condos, one thing that's good and bad about condos is that homes, the comps are subjective. Oh, my home has a pool. My home has refinished floors. But condos, it's like, well, you live in Legoland, so they're pretty much all the same. So the comps are pretty straight up. So the comps for my place were selling at $2 million, a little bit under, and I've had to sell for about a quarter less than that, or to get under contract, which is a kind of a kick in the nuts for me. But at the same time, I'm more interested in making a deal than being stubborn about what's happening with the market.
And the reality is, when you got to move, and it's you're just transferring somewhere else, so it doesn't matter. Interesting thing with real estate, it's like if you sell at the peak, you're also typically buying at the peak if you're buying right in the same market.
Also, for real estate, if you're investing in real estate, not living in it, it's a business decision. When you're living in it, it's an emotional decision, and you want to try and make it as much of an investment as possible. But hey, sometimes you got to put your family first and your personal needs first. So I'm a little bit in that boat, but I would say I've timed it pretty well too. Half luck, half me being pretty in tune with the market.
Okay. So you've been in the market since 2018. You've mentioned some of the opportunities that you see in Florida, like specifically the fact that there's a lot of people that move down there that want turnkey stuff and not a lot of like hungry, motivated people that are renovating, turning older houses around. What did you learn from turning this condo around? Did you work with somebody to help you design it? How did you do it? And what did you learn? And what would you kind of share as a message for somebody else who is trying to get involved with real estate in the same way?
Never do it. I used to say that jokingly because I did a full remodel. So
It's like
literally
gut remodel.
everything everything to the plumbing, electrical, everything. I don't regret it because it was worth it in the long run with the value that was added. But talk about stressful, and I did this during COVID. So that was the other big hiccup for me, is that it was like, oh, I want this flooring, I want this cabinet, or I want this paint finish. And then you'd order it. And then a month later, like, oh yeah, that's stuck on a container somewhere. You're not like, what's your second choice? What's your third choice? So my project specifically was a pain in the butt just because everything was twice as hard as it normally is. And a good example is I had to put new windows in behind me here. They're hurricane impact windows, they're extremely expensive, but they literally got stuck on a container on a ship that like wasn't allowed to come into the port. So, lived with we had like plywood up on the windows for a long time. But my lesson or message to most people is don't take on one of these projects unless you're an extremely patient and emotionally, neutral person, because it's a roller coaster ride that is hard to sit through. But if you can do it, there's still a ton of money to be made down here in South Florida, even though I still think the property values for finished properties are in trouble right now.
My experience is I built during the same time during COVID. And yeah, one of the more frustrating parts was what you talked about: timelines, delays, things like that. The price of built in 2018 versus 2022, and the price of lumber was so different between the two. You get bids that were crazy and all the sorts of things you had to kind of navigate. Yeah, it's just very interesting to see the same thing kind of was happening in Florida. Like when things boom like that, you have the benefit of prices going up. And if you're holding, the prices are going up, and that's great. But you also have the pressure it puts on all the developers, because all the subcontractors, all the contractors are all so freaking busy because everyone's trying to cash in on this boom, that things just become more challenging.
Yeah, it's a classic boom bust, supply demand scenario. And I was definitely in that here in Florida. I want to mention the way I did it money wise, because I think it was an interesting deal, is got a loan to purchase the place. And this is when rates were low, but got an extra amount of money in that loan to pay for the remodel. And it was packaged into the same loan. So it was not a construction loan. It was an extra amount of money that the bank approved to pay for the remodel of the condo.
Did you need to supply plans and everything?
So I had my contractor work with the bank, and he supplied the plans and the list of supplies and what it would cost. They wrote off on it that they were okay with it, because the bank believed that after we did the project, the value would be in line. Actually, we would be undervalued for what the mortgage size was compared to the comps. So they were very comfortable with lending us that money. And so once we finished the remodel, we had the certificate of occupancy from the city and the county and all that, and we submitted that to the bank. And then the loan just went ahead as normal, as if it was a normal loan, which is really interesting.
Then with that, were you paying the full amount throughout the entire thing? That's the downside, right?
That's the downside. Yeah. So I was paying the full amount. And actually, what you're getting at is they let out the money for construction in different tranches. They officially raised the amount for the full loan at the point of I had the certificate of occupancy.
Oh, so you weren't paying.
I had the initial amount for the purchase of the place, and then as the tranches got released, but it happened so quickly that honestly the bank wasn't really catching up fast enough with the payment schedule, because this was during COVID. This is when just everything was taking longer than it was, and I would hate to tell the story in detail just because I know it's a once in a lifetime scenario that happened, but that's still definitely available now. If you find a place, you go to a bank and say, hey, I want to remodel this, I want to borrow on the value of the property plus the construction costs. So many, especially private banks, smaller community banks, are interested in wrapping that all in together.
And that's a nice thing, because it takes some of the risk away from having to refi. At least the rate you're going to get.
Yep.
And for the last, I guess I would say 15, 20 years, it's just been expected that the rates are going to be super low. But now that they're back up to being higher, it feels like the interest rate risk is pretty high.
Definitely.
So, okay. So you see, that's a good way of financing it. That's very interesting. Do you remember the name of that loan?
I don't remember the name of the loan. We should add it in the show notes or something. I'll look it up, because it was a special loan. It was purchase plus construction or something like that. And again, this was at a private local bank, and they had the custom stuff before the pandemic hit.
I think that's an underrated thing to talk about specifically with real estate, is who you find for your loan officer. You can get so many things done in different ways when you find when you don't go to the large banks.
Absolutely.
I,
I mean,
yeah,
Bank of America or Chase or
they're
Wells or
like
whatever, they're just corporate. They don't know the local markets. But the bank I use, literally down the street from here, they're pretty aware of what's going on, and that's their business, is to make deals with locals, right? And much more
totally.
willing to do business there.
The lady I worked with, Donna Fox, loan officer, she
Donna
was
Fox, that sounds like
Donna
quite the name.
Fox. It's quite the name, especially because the way that she was recommended to me, she was recommended to me by a builder who was like, "You got to work with Donna Fox. She's a bulldog. She'll get it done." That was her. That was the recommendation. And turns out she gets everything done. She figures it out. She goes. She's so like extremely creative coming, but you want to find someone like that who can help you get deals done and push things through and make things happy. She's definitely on the more aggressive side of trying to like make creative deals work.
Yeah, and
But
I want to say, because we talked in our Austin episode about all the deals you did in the banks. I think
yeah,
that's one thing that especially newer real estate investors or even new homeowners don't realize. You got to go into a bank and talk to people. I think we're so used to doing
yes,
things digitally now. There's a huge opportunity for people just to go talk to the lender, go explain the situation. This is how I'm employed, or here's where my money is. This is the deal. Let's figure something out. It's literally their business to make deals, to lend money, and they're not really going to know the full story unless you go in there. And people don't do that anymore. They don't go into banks because most everything's online now. But if you go in there and talk and tell your story, hey, they're going to try and do something with you.
and also you don't want to be discouraged if somebody says no,
Of course.
because that was my experience. First couple people I talked to, we had kind of an untraditional thing we were trying to do, and so yeah, you want to talk to multiple people and find the right fit for what you're doing, because some people specialize in, let's say, construction loans, or what you did, right, where you're doing renovations, and they're more comfortable with that type of an understanding of what's being done. And if you find the right person, they can help you to get through a project that otherwise some banks would have no interest in funding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah. And today, the real estate market for the lending side is nothing like it was back then. But I still think, if there's a will, there's a way. So it's still worth going into banks and just seeing what the environment is. But yeah, so like I said, right now I'm selling my place. I'm
Yep.
going to be a new buyer in the market, and we can talk about that in a little bit, because I've started making some offers in some places, some super lowball offers, and you'd be shocked about what I'm getting back. But I wanted to talk really quickly about the different markets in Florida,
Yep.
because where I'm at, Palm Beach, I would say is definitely higher end, especially over the past couple of years. What has happened is that West Palm Beach used to be this sleepy town that more or less serviced the wealth on Palm Beach Island and the local community, but it's completely changed now. You like Wall Street Journal is calling it Wall Street South, which is West Palm Beach. Goldman Sachs moved an office there. Merrill Lynch, like tons of major banks have major offices in West Palm Beach now. It's one of those cities that Austin used to look like. There's tower cranes everywhere. There's high rises. There's lots of billionaires now who have relocated here full time. Lots of hedge funds that moved down here full time. So those are all, noteworthy things, headline worthy things. But what people aren't realizing is that all the employees for these companies and banks have moved their families down to this region. And so no longer is this a bedroom community with snowbirds who are seasonal. This is an area where families are buying at homes. Schools are very difficult to get into now. Of course, there's more traffic, but the West Palm Beach and Palm Beach County area has completely transformed in the past couple of years. Down further south, I won't talk too much about Miami just because I'm sure everyone knows what's going on down there. It's complete boomtown. It's madness. Right now, as I speak, there are more high rises under construction in Miami than the entire state of California, which is pretty wild.
That is wild.
It might be a bubble indicator too.
Yeah, right. Has it peaked down there?
It's tough to say. I would definitely say that Miami got really expensive, and it's coming down a little bit. The only reason why I would say it might not roll over as much as people think it might is because, just like Texas, there's still people moving here, and there's still people going to Miami to do business. Miami used to be the whatever cocaine cowboys of the 80s, and people go down there to party on spring break and not really do anything much on the business side. But there's a tech scene down there. There's a huge crypto community. There's a community of Latin America. Everyone calls Miami the capital of Latin America, but there's huge finance going on in that city now, and it's a destination for a lot of people in business to do business versus simply vacation. So
Yeah.
I do think the market's a little too hot there, but I don't think it's hot like it has been the past couple of decades where it's cyclical. It's more like, okay, there's actually industry now down there, which is very interesting.
I think it's for me. I think of the same thing with Texas. It's like I'm long Texas.
Mhm.
I'm just my time frame is that in the short term, there's going to be a continued correction. Overall, long.
Yep, absolutely. And I would say that's all Florida. And then each city has its. I would say Miami's definitely hot right now. The other city that's hot and cooling off a lot right now is Tampa. Tampa had its, I don't know what kind of moment you want to call it, but they had Bill Gates dump in a ton of money in the community there. Then you had the Buccaneers, you had Tom Brady, this huge kind of energy happened there, and then this huge startup community there, and property prices there just went crazy. Then they got hit by that hurricane just south of them, so that kind of hit the brakes on the momentum of the real estate. But Tampa as a region of Florida has absolutely boomed. I think that's going to cool off a little bit there. But what I'm getting at is Tampa, Miami, Palm Beaches, and Jacksonville all in the same state. But if you compared it to a different region of the U.S., they might as well be different states in terms of their property behavior. And the other thing is that people are still moving to Florida. The net population growth year over year is still increasing. So people are still coming here.
For sure. Well, what are you seeing right now? So when you moved in 2018, right, the difference was that it felt fairly
sleepy
cheap
and it felt sleepy. Yeah.
Yeah. What does it feel like now?
It feels expensive and busy. And my investor hat or my investor brain kind of looks like alarm bells sounding off. I
Yeah.
think if I didn't mention the busy part, the expensive part would bother me more. But
Yeah.
I'll use a really good example. During the summer in Florida, if you go to a restaurant a couple of years ago, it was you can sit at any table you want. We're pretty much dead of summer right now. It's July 31st today. And I go out to dinner a couple nights a week, and it's still a half hour, 45-minute wait for most restaurants. And this had never happened in this area prior to this population migration that's come here in Florida. So I feel like there's a new amount of wealth here that is permanent, or at least living here full time, and it's palpable. Where my kids go to school, it used to be very easy to get in there. Now it's like this huge, like multi-year, put your name on a list, like gotta have know the right person. It's very difficult to get into schools now, and it just seems like everywhere you go, there's things like that show, hey, there's a huge demand that is not seeming to let up. So that's the general vibe here right now.
And then as far as opportunities go, right? So you mentioned one of the things you're kind of thinking about is you've been making some kind of low ball offers right now.
Yeah.
Where do you see the biggest real estate opportunities in Florida? And maybe specifically talking about in like the West Palm Beach in your area, and then maybe expand out a little bit further into other things that you see.
So I'm deep in this market right now. I have multiple offers right now. I'm going through a transaction. So I have a lot of ideas. I'm going to try and be as concise as possible. Number one is the condo market here in all of Florida is in serious trouble. Disaster area trouble. And we'll review that in a little bit, but condo market is screwed. The second opportunity I see is small homes, 2 and 3 bedroom homes that were built in the 50s and 60s that need to be torn down and rebuilt, or a complete remodel. There's a ton of these kind of, I don't know which 50s and 60s homes that just need to be redone.
Yeah.
It's you go through some neighborhoods and you have like a 7-bedroom mansion right next to a 1,400 square foot 3-bedroom home, and a 1,400 square foot 3-bedroom home is like tiny bedrooms and maybe 1 bathroom for the entire house. The third thing is land or anywhere you want to build up. Other than developers look for bigger projects. So the sweet spot is like in little tiny pieces of land, little lots. People coming into Florida, they don't want a project; they want a finished home. So if you're able to come build a home on a blank lot, I think there's an opportunity there.
And do the numbers make sense right now given the interest rates, or is that the challenge?
I don't think they've made sense for the past 2 years, but starting maybe a month or two ago, I think they're starting to make sense. And the reason why is I'll give you an example. I've been testing the waters on some properties around here, viewing them, talking to realtors. I'll give an example. I looked at a house that was listed for $3 million. And I think $3 million right now is, I wouldn't say it's a deal, but it's relatively fairly priced compared to what it was selling for that neighborhood a year or two ago. The realtor will not stop calling me back, and it makes me think that I'm not only one of the few people that looked at the house, but he thinks that he wants to get an offer out of me. And I basically said, look, I won't do it because I think you're overpriced. And he basically said, hey, even if it's $2.1 million, you should throw an offer out, which is $1 million off of the $3 million they're asking. And I know I'm talking
that you already felt was reasonably priced.
Totally. And I know maybe some people listening are talking like, what are you talking about, multi-million dollar homes here? This is crazy. But for context, 6 months ago, this conversation was not happening. And so I've had multiple of these homes. I'm just going in to look, and the realtors are just calling me back almost weekly. Hey, what do you think? You should throw an offer in. A year ago, that was not happening at all. And then on the land side, I've made a couple like super lowball offers. For example, like say a lot's $1 million. I'll put in an offer for like 550, and they'll counter like 625. So they're asking $1 million and they come off $400,000. They're coming off 40% off of what they're asking. So it shows me that this is a market where a couple of things are going on. There's really stubborn sellers, first of all, that are just holding out and aren't willing to make a deal. And then there's sellers that are starting to get the whiff of, okay, I need to get serious about making a deal here, and I need to entertain these really low ball offers. And maybe the other part of all this is there's no offers coming in at all. And that's probably the reality of what's going on. And so that has just happened. I'm talking the past couple of months, and I'm like in the game here, and I did not get this feeling at all 6 months, a year ago.
Interesting conversation that I had that reflects that in Austin. I ran into my realtor 2 months ago, and she said that she had this little like realtor mastermind group that she went to. A bunch of veteran real estate agents in Texas. I think like 40 or something like that got together for this conference. And she said that there was, I think, over 25% of them that were on tax repayment plans because they could not pay their taxes from the previous year because it was such a boom and then went so dead that people didn't put anything away for the rainy day. And it's interesting what you're talking about when you talk about the real estate agent like hammering you and getting back to you. Agents are hungry right now.
I feel bad for agents. Actually, I don't really.
I don't feel bad for agents either.
Yeah, I have a personal like vendetta against agents. I say that kind of jokingly. Side note, I'm selling my place right now in a completely private party transaction. I've never done this before. I've done a lot of transactions over the past 10 years. It's my first time I've done it with 0 realtors. I sold as a private party, and a private party found me, and we're using a lawyer in the middle. I've done it before with one realtor on one side or the other, but never with no realtors. I've done it a lot of times in other countries. That's how most countries do it. No realtors, but never in the US. Never in the US have I done this without a single realtor involved, which is a whole other story that we can dive into later. But I want to go back to the condo conversation real quick because
I'm very interested.
This is a major problem. So backdrop on condos in Florida. There are thousands of these condo buildings, just like mine, that are 8, 10, 12, 14 stories on the beach. Can't complain about being on the beach, but a lot of these buildings are pretty old. They're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. They have a lot of problems with saltwater air, just getting beat up from general weather being on the coast of Florida, and hurricanes that here too, of course, right? So most of these buildings were bought by people 20, 30 years ago for $200,000 a unit, if that. And just as you were alluding to before, a lot of these people have not saved up for a rainy day issue. And so as property prices here in Florida have exploded, well, property taxes, even though they're capped how much they can raise per year, have been going up. The main thing that's been going up is HOA dues, because just cost of living.
They got to fix the condo.
They got to fix the condo. All the things that go into fixing a condo have raised in prices. Insurance has doubled. The building next to me got assessed for a 78% increase for the year on their insurance policy, because insurance companies are saying, okay, your property's worth twice as much now. Well, guess what? If it's worth twice as much, we got to insure you for twice as much.
Yep.
So that's happening. And then the last thing, which is a culmination of all these events, there was a disaster down in the Miami area in the town of Surfside where there's a building collapse. Maybe some people heard about this. A lot of people died. Total tragedy. But
my friends were in that building 2 days before it happened. They know people that died.
That's terrifying.
Crazy.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's scary. So this building had a long history of not being kept up, and just when I say kept up, I'm not talking about like swept floors. I'm talking about rebar rusting, the entire integrity of the building being at risk. So this building collapsed. Anyway, the government of Florida said, hey, we can never have this happen again. And they enacted all of these state Senate bills that force condos to do all these retrofits, have all these inspections. And right now, as I speak, buildings throughout Florida are having this done. What this has resulted in is many condos assessing their owners insane amounts of money, $100, $200, $300,000 per unit. And if you bought your unit 20 years ago for $200,000 and you get a check or a bill in the mail for $300,000, like, you're not going to pay that, or you're not going to be able to. So you're going to have to sell it. That is currently happening right now, and it'll probably happen for the next couple of years.
Can you explain? So tell me a little bit more. So they come in, they assess it, and they say, like, basically these are the things that need to be fixed to reach code. Is that what it is?
Yeah, and I'm very familiar with this process because I did this in the building I'm in. They have an inspector come out. He's an actual building engineer, and they tap on the concrete and find out where there's issues with rusted rebar. And anywhere they find it, they have to jackhammer into the concrete, replace the rebar, and then put concrete back.
Sure.
And if you're dealing,
it's an incredibly expensive process.
Oh my God. Not only that, it's time consuming. It's very difficult work. And you're on 100 feet in the air on scaffolding and swing stages. So, I mean, it's a major project, and you can imagine how expensive this stuff is. So let's say a 10-story building, it's a $2 million project or $1 million project. Well, you got to divide that up by however many units are in the building, and then the units pay the bill. The building that I'm in right now, I think there's 40 something units in here, 46 units. There's only 6 full-time residents here. The rest of them are snowbirds. They only come down for part of the year. So
and those snowbirds get a bill.
What are they going to do?
They don't want that. They don't want that.
And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I have some ideas of what's going to happen in the Florida condo market. But if you're listening to this thinking, I'd like to eventually move to Florida or something, do not buy a condo right now. Wait. Let's see what happens here. You may be able to pick up condos for pennies on the dollar here in Florida. And as bad as I'm making all of this sound, remember, these condos are on the ocean, and living on the ocean is pretty sweet. The views are incredible. You get to walk out, walk in the sand, see sea turtles, all kinds of wildlife. And I feel like the long-term value of these units will be there because they're on the beach, but the short-term risk is off the charts. I don't know what's going to happen. There's going to be a major, major problem.
I mean, I can see opportunities where people literally pick up a condo for the cost of doing the renovations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you go on YouTube right now, there's tons of videos like Condo Crisis, or this is happening, or check out this assessment. And so this is definitely known about, but I don't think the full repercussions are being felt yet, because it's unfolding as we speak. The other big opportunity, which has already been happening, is, let's say a building is really old, and like the Surfside building, let's say it hasn't fallen down yet, hopefully. Developers are coming in and offering to buy out all of the owners in the building, and then they're tearing it down and rebuilding a brand new, state-of-the-art high-rise. And if you're a developer, that's certainly an opportunity. If you're an individual private investor, that might be quite a project to take on. But that is,
I don't recommend it.
Yeah, don't. If you like, torturing yourself, go for that. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of buildings here that are great that need some work, but they're going to be units for selling for fire sale prices.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I have not followed that. And it's so different. It's back to like the local markets have inefficiencies and opportunities to exploit that you only can understand if you're there, because none of that is dealt with in the market that I'm most familiar with, which is Austin, Texas. There's not.
Yeah, you're not dealing with saltwater hurricanes.
Not dealing with saltwater, no.
Battering the side of the building. A different market is Orlando. Orlando, as everyone knows, is Disneyland, Universal Studios. It's like amusement park city. But it's actually a major city now, Orlando itself. It doesn't have necessarily the ocean influence issue, but it does have there's been incredible construction there, and there's a lot of people calling for a big market correction in Orlando specifically, not because of the condo issue, but because they've overbuilt there. The volume has gone up so much with this expectation that this influx to Florida will never end. But totally. At some point, the supply and demand economics have got to equal out. And I don't know what's going to happen there, but there's another market that a lot of people are looking at nervously.
I mean, the thing about Orlando is the value proposition for me is not that exciting about Orlando at all. Flat, hot, fairly gross, in my personal opinion.
Orlando's my nightmare. Sorry, anybody listening from Orlando. Like Disneyland, like I know my kids like, but oh my God, it's my nightmare. And then Orlando is hot swamp in the summer. Not me.
It's bad. Adult. Yeah, I'm not an adult Disney fan. I'm not an
Me,
adult Disney fan. There's a the craziest Instagram that I've seen is plus size park hoppers. Have you seen this thing?
I feel like we're gonna get canceled if we dive into this topic too much, but
Oh, dude, it
you
is
know where
bad.
my head's at with that.
It is bad. They're like literally walk around these amusement parks talking about like how to sit in different seats. Like, are the seats large enough for us? One of them, the one that went crazy was Disney Rash. They were
I
talking about
saw
how
that.
like too much, too much. Literally, like just walking around Disney was giving people sweat rashes because they'd never exercised before.
We
Absolutely
got we
insane.
got people, wars basically breaking around the world and major problems, and then we got this subset of humanity that has eaten so much that they can't even fit their butt into a chair. And oh
That's
man,
why I'm long Florida, short Orlando.
yeah, and that's
Uh,
actually another thing about Florida. I will say there has been a demographic shift here, and not that demographic we just mentioned, but there is a younger demographic here for sure. West
totally.
Palm, when I first got here, was kind of dead at night. In 2018-19, as you go down, um, the main street's called Clematis Street, or go to Palm Beach Island, and it was pretty much dead. Go there on the weekend now at night, it is hopping. It is super popular. People out, young people, tons of transplants that are coming for work. There are a lot of singles, so it's a very very vibrant city when it comes to that younger demographic, which didn't really exist at all.
I think that kind of continues with my general thesis that most Americans want to, the places that are going to continue to boom are the places that can provide some level of the American dream. And, the places that are priced appropriately, just given the fact that Starlink has made remote work in more rural areas with fast internet possible. There's so many people that are working remotely and have stable careers. It's like places that allow you to be able to build or buy houses and live a life that is closer to the American dream are just going to continue to boom because it is, for the most part, so kid hostile in cities.
Absolutely.
It is hostile.
And that's one thing about Florida that is kind of unquantifiable. What you're talking about is just the ease of doing life. Like, is there bureaucracy here? And a very good symbol of that is there's a railroad in Florida called the Bright Line, and now
Yeah.
goes from Miami to Orlando, and it's technically a high speed railway from. There's a stop in West Palm, and then it goes straight to Orlando, and it goes 120 miles an hour that entire way. And the train is spotless clean. You can get a first class car. You walk around, it's open bar, food, snacks. You get even like the cattle car, like the third class car, whatever you want to call it, is super nice. Free Wi-Fi. It's incredible. In contrast to the high speed rail that exists in California, that they've spent 6, 7, 8 billion dollars on, and they have like 6 miles of track or something. It's like
Insane.
the perfect symbol of bureaucracy and red tape versus a location just getting things done. And
Yeah.
Florida as a symbol, like that's what's going on in Florida. Is this that Bright Line's a good symbol of that?
So coming in with your investor hat on, it's one, condos, looking
Mm-hmm.
at that. Two, low ball offers.
Mm-hmm.
There's opportunities in Florida. And it seems like it's going to continue to, these opportunities will, just as long as the interest rates continue to stay high, properties are going to need people to put offers, and people get desperate. They want to move. So that's kind of your other one. Anything else you're looking at from an investor perspective?
Yeah, and this isn't real estate exact, but the service industry down here, I'm talking AC, plumbing, electrical, contracting, the retrofitting companies to do the work on the buildings, they are murdering it down here. They are making so much money. The demand for services here is wild. And it's probably to most of the US. I'd feel like it's just magnified here. And you were talking about it on a different episode. Like, what does it take to get a plumber out and do a simple job? What does it take for an electrician to come out and do a simple job? And it used to be you would call somebody up, they come out in a day or two and fix it. Now, where I'm at, and lots of places throughout the US, it's I'll be out in 2 months, or I can't get you in at all. Sorry. Or hey, your job's not big enough. It's just I'm just not interested in it.
Or just never calling back?
Totally. And I would say that is amplified. Maybe there's other places throughout the US, but I can't imagine many more that the problem is worse than here in South Florida. And one of the most interesting businesses, HVAC. You're in Florida, your AC's on 24/7, 365. The HVAC industry is like, it's like basically like having a hospital or an ambulance. Like you have to have it. And for
Yeah.
investors who are looking at acquiring a company, or if you're actually talented in the trades want to come work, you're going to crush it down here, make so much money. It's unbelievable.
Well, I've just seen so many roll-ups happen. There's been so many, even since we started building in Austin in 2018, two of the HVAC companies that were private in 2018, when they worked on 2022, had gotten rolled up by private equity companies. So that deal is like, it's been spotted, right? It's been spotted,
Yeah.
and it's interesting that it's just been happening.
I mean, I don't know where that's going to head. It's probably getting a little bubbly. You have a lot of people like Cody Sanchez talks about it a lot. The the rise of the blue collars, which I totally agree with. I just don't know where those valuations are. But I'm talking about like an individual or somebody
I think
who,
an individual starting a
yeah,
HVAC
just like buy a
business.
van and go out and do work, you're going to crush it down here. But as far as real estate, we went over the condos, we went over the houses, we went over like building from ground up. Another thing that's interesting that I just really learned about Florida is that, especially in the northern part of the state, there's big ranches, there's big farmland. And when you think of Florida, you think of like Florida man, like some dude wrestling a gator and shotgunning Budweisers and on a fan boat, like somewhere in the Keys. But in the northern part of the state, it's actually a lot cooler. There's a little bit there's big trees, there's horse country, the hobby farms or whatever you want to call it, that idea of buying up an old farm, fixing it up, flipping it. I think that's a huge opportunity because the horse country here during the winter is wild. There's a whole polo society here that, for example, and there's a town called Wellington, which is inland from West Palm Beach. There are private jets that come in from the Middle East with horses on them just to play polo out here. And it's one of the places in the US where this horse culture exists. So I think there's a whole nother opportunity in that real estate world, which is this big ranch and farm real estate investing opportunity.
What's your prediction for Florida? Well, let's just say your area in Florida. What's the timeline you think for bottoming, turning around? That's an incredibly challenging question, but
I hate making predictions because it's, when you make them correct, it's like, yeah, I said this 2 years ago. And then when you get them wrong, you're like, oh, I'm just going to pretend like that would never said that. I'm super bearish on the condo issue here. I think that the condos are in major, major trouble. And I think that condo issue will drag down other parts of the market just by association.
sure.
I do think the housing market's overvalued still, and that's across the entire U.S. High prices, high rates, something's got to give, and neither of them have given yet. Prices have got to give. In general, I think Florida's pretty well positioned still as an economy and as its trend, just like Texas we were talking about. So I think it's all right there. I would just be very cautious right now about buying a new or finished or remodeled home. Right now in Florida, I would not be doing that. I would either be lowballing the heck out of a fixer-upper land or something that you can put a ton of value in. Otherwise, I would not be touching it right now.
Which is interesting because that's the exact opposite feeling that I had in Austin, which is I would be looking at lowballing new houses because of all the development.
Yeah, it's funny too because they're in so many ways they're similar markets, which is, hey, they boomed during this whole pandemic period, but on the other hand, they're very different because of the existing demographics previous to the pandemic, and then also what opportunities there specifically are, meaning the condos versus the homes in Austin and the ways that these states have chosen to navigate the new economy versus New York and California and all that.
Interesting. This has been good, man. I have been very I've been very interested throughout this, just learning kind of what's going on in Florida. It's a new market to me for the most part. I've been to Florida a few times, and like you said, kind of in the beginning of this, it's one of those markets that has been in the news so much because there's been such a boom going on. Definitely taken away a couple interesting things, and we'll have to continue to report on what the hell's going on with these condos because from what you're talking about, it sounds like it could get really, really crazy and people can make a lot of money picking them up for basically nothing.
Yeah, I really believe that's one of the biggest opportunities in American real estate right now that nobody knows what's going on because there's so many intricacies of it. But in the next year or two, that's one thing I feel confident about that is going to have major problems.
Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you guys like this episode, the best thing you can possibly do, subscribe, write a review, and email us. You can email us as well and hit us up. You can email austin@adventurecapitalist.com or find us on Twitter. And yeah, we were excited to have you here. We'll talk to you in the next episode.
See ya.